Welcome back to Careers and Coffee Talk. I'm your host, Laura. Today's guest is Ashley Morris, the Preparedness and Outreach Division Manager at the Prince George's County Office of Emergency Management, where she oversees things like community engagement, continuity planning, and the Community Emergency Response Team, or CERT program. She also serves on the Maryland and National Capital Region Incident Management teams, and she's widely recognized as an emergency management influencer with a passion for merging meteorology and emergency management. From her early dream of becoming a meteorologist to finding her calling in local emergency management, Ashley has spent her career connecting science, data, and community outreach. She's led public engagement through some of the most challenging times, including starting a new role right as the pandemic began. And she's a strong advocate for raising the visibility of local emergency management and creating national standards for the profession. In this episode, Ashley and I are going to talk about how weather safety and preparedness go hand in hand, what she's learning it takes to lead and inspire a team, and where she sees her future and the future of the field heading. So grab your coffee and get ready. Ashley's story will inspire you to think bigger about preparedness, advocacy, and the power of connecting people to science. Let's get into it. All right, Ashley, it's so good to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to have a little chat today.
Yeah, me too. I am looking forward to diving into it. But first things first, got coffee? Are you caffeinated today?
Doing the water. So actually, I'm taking August as my caffeine-free month. So I'm 2 weeks
Okay.
in, still working hard, and I haven't fallen asleep at work yet. So
Good. I'm glad to hear that. We're going to try to keep you awake now too.
yeah, definitely.
Well, I'm so glad to have you. I'm looking forward to talking to a real life emergency management influencer, which was how you were introduced to me. I love this phrase, by the way, because it's not one that you hear every day. Certainly not in a field like emergency management, which tends not to be in the public spotlight. So I'm curious, what does emergency management influencer mean to you? What does that term mean to you? And how do you see the role and the responsibility of being an influencer, especially now during National Emergency Management Awareness Month?
Yeah, so I always have to laugh because somehow I picked up that little nickname somewhere. And I think it all started from like a few years ago when I first entered emergency management. I was already using my Twitter account to talk to a lot of meteorologists because I come from the weather world. And a lot of us are really nerdy and we like to share things like, weather models, weather forecasts, weather research. And I was just like, well, why don't we have a place for emergency management? I'm brand new EM. I just want to talk about EM. And so I ended up really just being a nerd and turning my Twitter into EM Twitter. We came up with EMG Twitter. And then ever
Okay.
since then, I've just been spitting out tweets and other things just about all things emergency management. So I guess it's grown to that level. But for me, it means a lot to me because it's really helped me learn as a professional.
Hmm.
I think being able to network with people, talk about
Sure.
things, share publications. And then also too, I think right now, like role and responsibility, I think it's important for us to be really vocal now about our field. On top of just being really nerdy and passionate about emergency management, I really, really, really am passionate about more people learning about local level emergency management and the visibility of it, just so we can really grow our profession and hopefully get bigger, staffing, budget, expansion that we need to take on disasters in the United States.
Yeah, you mentioned your passion for weather and weather safety and emergency management, all of that. Where did that begin for you? What sparked that passion or that interest for you?
Yeah, so I totally got caught in a thunderstorm outside with my dad and his friend when I was about 7.
Okay.
And I was really scared. I was actually
Mm,
crying, lightning all around, And my dad's friend taught me how to count the thunder after the lightning.
right.
One 1,000, two
Uh-huh.
1,000, three 1,000. And so I think he was just doing that to like shut me up because I was probably hysterical.
No.
But I got hooked ever since then, and it's so interesting because all I remember growing up is like going outside during thunderstorms, counting the seconds, and then writing them down in like a weather journal.
Oh my gosh, I
Um,
love it.
Yeah,
Please tell me you
so
still have this journal somewhere.
I wish. Yeah. And I used to also use like yellow crayon and like draw the little lightning bolts. And yeah, I
Adorable.
really wish I still had it though.
Well, and then you got your start, your career start, right, in meteorology.
Yeah, actually, I mean, I went to school for
Okay.
meteorology. So went to school at Texas Tech University, got my degree in atmospheric science, geophysics first. And then I got into the master's program of atmospheric science, hoping that I could go work for the Weather Service.
Okay.
And then I just kind of tripped and fell and learned about emergency management at a conference. So
It happens that
um,
way, doesn't it?
it does, but like I couldn't be happier. Ultimately, even when I wanted to go to the Weather Service, I always cared about like weather safety and just the weather impacts on people. And I think like there's not a better fit than emergency management for me.
Yeah. Well, when you look back at some of those early experiences, you mentioned the thunderstorm. I think when we initially met, you talked a little bit about the 2011 Tuscaloosa tornadoes. How did moments like these help shape the way that you think about, bridging that, science, forecasting, public safety, emergency management, all of those worlds together?
I think definitely, being in university when we had some of those really tough high fatality tornado days, the 2011 outbreak,
Mm-hmm.
Joplin, all of those, it really opened my eyes because before that, I think all of us in the field, including myself, thought, if we get really good at the science and we get really good at the forecast and we put the warning out with a lot of lead time, then we'll definitely save everybody, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those two things definitely didn't happen, especially with Joplin, because we know we had, almost an hour or so of lead time, and we still had a lot of fatalities. And so I still remember to this day sitting in my graduate student office as an atmospheric science master's student, thinking about that and being like, well, maybe a perfect warning isn't going to be the solution,
Mm-hmm.
right? Maybe it's more about warning access and who receives the warning and how they receive the warning and then where they go. What's their shelter access look like? What are building codes like? All the external things that you see a lot in, local level government, code standards, all of that. So I think that really kind of piqued my eyes and my interest because then I started seeing how all weather can really be, impacted by those variables that are completely outside the scope of like forecasting and data.
Hmm. Well, I did a little digging, Ashley, before this conversation. I understand you were recognized for your leadership with a book club and for helping the emergency management community, better understand weather science through the research that you've done. So what role do you think reading and continuous learning play in being a strong emergency manager?
I am extremely passionate about just education and always learning.
Hmm.
I think when I started, like I mentioned before, I was really unique because I came out of STEM or science into emergency management, where a lot of people
Yeah,
come out of public safety and other things.
sure.
And so I had a lot to learn, learning all this stuff about how government works,
Yeah.
fire department stuff, public safety stuff, whatever. And my first job I had, I was really blessed to have someone push me into training.
Mm.
So I took so much training my first year. And I think for me, it really builds your confidence as a new
Yeah.
professional, but also just in emergency management because you're learning the skills to actually do what you need to do every day.
Yeah.
But on top of that, like our field is revolving so fast. Like
Hmm.
I personally feel like you can't just learn about how to do emergency management today and still be able to do it in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. I mean, even our hazards and our threats are just changing so much. Society's changing so much, things almost day to day at this point. And so I'm a huge believer in just like continuous training, checking out new courses, even retaking some courses that are updated by FEMA. And then, two, doing higher education. So
Yeah.
taking a look at master's programs, PhD programs, academics.
Hmm.
I am a huge nerd of like publications, research, and that's another area where I see a lot of potential in our field about like bridging like research and academic emergency management and practitioner. Um,
Yeah.
in terms of just like how we apply all of those tactics and like also like how we use data to do our day jobs basically.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned so much that kind of evolves over time. There's also differences, right, in depending on the communities that you're in and that you're serving. I know you've worked at in Texas, you came out here to DC. What's the biggest lesson that you have learned along the way in kind of tailoring some outreach efforts? Because I know that's a part of your job now, right? When it comes to different communities.
Yeah, so I think you really have to know your community.
Hmm.
And it's been so interesting for me with my career because I've been local level city county my entire career,
Yep.
but the jurisdictions I've worked for are vastly different.
Yeah.
In Texas, I was still kind of working suburban, but when I had a chance to work for a small city in a county that I worked for, it was great because it was very small and homey. I felt like it was an awesome place to build a program, but you really got to learn like every little neighborhood and every little niche of it because it was just a smaller jurisdiction, right? So from going to that and then coming out here and being, in two really large counties outside of the
Yeah.
DC area, and then add in, like you said, like just different cultures, diversity, just different ways of living out here. It's really important to learn your community and know who's who, how they live,
Hmm.
all those variables. For me, like I've also experienced living in a place versus not living in the place I work. And I personally like living and being immersed in where I work.
Sure.
I just feel like you learn everything, right? You learn, where the potholes are. You learn,
Yeah.
you have the same challenges the residents might have. And it's
Hmm.
really cool when you work in local government because then you can make your agencies or your friends aware of some of the challenges that are going on related to those departments. So I really think number one, you've got to analyze your jurisdiction. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Even with demographics and doing census data, that's a way, but I think that's key is learning, language, all of those things,
Hmm.
churches, religion, just societal makeup and
Yeah.
then figuring out ways to just imprint disaster preparedness into those communities.
Yeah. And figure out what resonates, right? So you're talking about like being in the community, right? But from when you first came here to DC and you were in Fairfax County, you actually started, speaking of challenges, you started your role right at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. So, how did you, at that time, right? You couldn't be in the community. It was a lot different. So, how did you adapt your engagement strategy when in-person outreach just was not possible?
Yeah, so I think we really had to focus on the virtual aspects and just the digital aspects.
Hmm.
And to me, it's kind of unfortunate because I know people don't really feel like they connect quite the same through a screen or anything
Sure.
else, but that's what we were kind of dealt. So we really focus on again knowing those demographics, working through the languages, and
Hmm.
then working through those groups. So, if I make a social media campaign for this awareness or we're trying to get information out during COVID, how can I partner with maybe the fire department or a community group to share my message on? We also had a few campaigns that actually actively encouraged that. So, hey, if you learn something from this, pass it on to your neighborhood. Or, when you retweet this to 10 different people, let us know. And it's like a contest. Or, just trying to get like digital engagement through social media, through webinars, and just these kinds of methods the best that we can because we just couldn't be out there. One last thing, I was really happy to see that we were also able to put outreach materials like in some of the food distribution boxes and some of the other
Yeah.
things we were doing with response.
Yeah.
And that's something that I learned and I still try to carry with because if we can ever tag team with any other like government operations and just
Sure.
slip in like a paper on an alert system or something, I find that as like a win-win and something that's kind of easy to get out there.
That was a huge evolution in digital engagement, right? Because that's what everybody was kind of forced into at the time. But how do you see social media like continuing to evolve as a tool for emergency managers and, especially when it comes to like outreach and education?
I think it's really big, and I think for us, we've grown a lot in the field with social media since I
Hmm.
started.
Yeah.
When I started, it was still a lot of Facebook and Twitter, and we actually had a lot of governments that weren't doing any of them. I would say I think most are now, but
Yeah.
they're still on those like old school
Yeah.
platforms like
Oh, yeah.
Facebook, Twitter.
Yeah.
What I would like to see is how can we really grow in like Instagram, YouTube, and like the YouTube streaming and like, yeah, I know not TikTok because the Homeland Security issues, but like, like those newscapes where people
Hmm.
are turning to more.
Yeah.
And what I would like to do or see is somebody really take that on and like try to reach those communities through that way. I think some people have. I haven't yet. I wish I would
Yeah.
have a little more time to like play with
Yeah.
that. But I think that's the next step um, as we move forward.
Well, you're now in Prince George's County, which is in Maryland, the Office of Emergency Management. You oversee things like planning, continuity, community emergency response teams or CERT program, and outreach and engagement. But you've been doing these things for a bit now, right? But you're still a relatively new leader. What has been the most rewarding part of stepping into a leadership role?
I think the most rewarding part for me is being able to take a step back and look at programming. And I think I've always been kind of like one of those strategic thinkers who kind of sees the full picture rather than
Hmm.
just the task.
Yeah.
And so I've really had a chance to like look at all the programs and see how we can just like make small little changes to make things either work better or
Sure.
easier on my team.
Hmm.
And one example is CERT. So we've been actively trying to rebuild that with like policies and legal documents. And it was really interesting to reveal that we didn't have some of those things that we really needed.
Okay.
But we're about to actually push that through this year. And
That's awesome.
yeah, like it's been really great. I know sometimes like when you're reevaluating programs and you're trying to do some of the strategy of it, like it takes longer than you wish it would.
Mm,
But when you start to actually see the progress, like it really does feel good that like you're actually improving a program or you're leaving a mark on a
yeah.
program that's going to help the community.
Yeah.
Um,
Makes it all
so
worth it.
yeah, so like being able to just formulate and just improve programs has always been a goal of mine.
Yeah.
Um, and then the other thing I would just say is I had a chance to take a new graduate who she just got her master's in Homeland Security and interned with us, and then was able to actually get hired into a planning position.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
Congrats to her.
I know it's been great. She's almost been here a year now.
Awesome.
But it's been really great, like to be able to foster like a
Mm,
brand new emergency manager. And I think that's like where another one of my passions really lie too, is like I'm really passionate about EM. Like I want people to know like the things that I can help them with,
yeah.
training, literature, like so I've been sending her to training and hopefully growing her hopefully in the first year.
Yeah.
So that's been a lot of
Yeah.
fun.
Well, what would you, so, you're kind of mentoring this, baby emergency manager. What piece of advice, if you could go back in time, would you give somebody just newly entering this field?
Training, honestly.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's what I told her. I said, you know what, like I will never say no to training. Like I don't
Hmm.
care if it's even like, an area that's not planning. Like if it's like anything else, like it could be
Yeah.
operations, logistics, like anything EM. Please go and learn because like the more you expand your knowledge, the better planner and just professional you'll be at a local level.
Yeah.
So that, which again, I was a little blessed to have that, but I know some colleagues are not that blessed.
Yeah.
And I think that's super important. And then two, for me, like what I've learned during 8 years of working in local is like there are a lot of situations where you might be put on an exercise program or a plan, and you kind of have to figure it out, right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, we've got to put on this tabletop. Here you go. And
Go
you
do
might be
it.
sitting there. Yeah. You
Yeah.
might be sitting there like, oh, I've never done this. Like, and I learned those skills with time, but I
Hmm.
think it it takes a little more confidence than you think.
Yeah.
And I'm always trying to teach her that because I think as a new graduate, you kind of expect to come into the working world being told everything, like how to do it, what to do, kind
Right.
of like
Right.
school.
Right.
And I actually prefer like giving frameworks and letting them work through it because I think you just learn so much more that way.
Yeah, for sure. Well, jumping into a leadership role, can also be challenging even when when you think you're ready. Like you're never really ready. Kind of the same thing. Like you just have to kind of go and do it. But what has surprised you the most about supervising a team?
So I definitely have read a lot of books. Again, like I'm a self-help nerd also, but reading books doesn't necessarily prepare you for like all of the connection and all of the, I would just say skills that you
Yeah.
you have to have, right?
Yeah.
And even though you know how to kind of apply it, or you're like, oh, well, I've heard a good leader's this, or, I had a supervisor that didn't really connect with. I wish they did this. It's funny because when you step in that role, sometimes you're like, oh, maybe I kind of understand, like, this is where their head was at with this, or this is harder than I thought it was at the bottom,
Yeah.
So I think some of that, and then really honestly, like the amount of mental capacity and time it takes to do the supervision, like, you know, check in on your team, help out
Yeah.
your team, keep things going, hiring, that's huge.
Right.
Just like all these admin things are a lot. And so, I used to just be a project pusher and now I've got to figure out like I've got to push projects at the middle level, but also manage and hopefully help my team along the way at the same time.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that. How do you find that balance, right? In meeting the demand of, managing programs and pushing projects and also supporting and developing your staff.
I think for me, now that I have the experience, I think that was the hardest in the beginning because it was like, how can I adjust to just work, 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 and like finding the time, to meet
Yeah.
with my team and do other things. And I think for me, I have a routine. So in the mornings, I try to do like all of my email, all of my admin, all of the stuff, you know, all the HR stuff,
Right.
hiring, job stuff, whatever I need to do that. I try to do that first thing. And then I'll roll into projects later. And then I'll have certain days that I'll really reserve for like deep work.
Hmm.
So like Tuesdays technically are like my telework day, the one I get all my deep work then because I'm at home.
You can focus. Yeah, sure.
I can focus, like I've got kind of a full plate. I don't have to commute, so I get an extra 2 hours of time that I don't have to worry about.
Yeah, totally. Totally. Um,
Yeah.
It sounds like you also had some good leaders yourself. Like you mentioned, someone kind of earlier in your career, a leader that you had pushing you into, training and kind of learning new things and stuff like that. What or who inspires you the most when it comes to your work today?
I think for me, I just care so much about this. And I want to say I think it goes back to like when I was a kid and that was like my calling.
Yeah,
I really just I never had a backup plan and I was never really confused on what I would do, even though it looks a little different from being a meteorologist. Like it was always just
yeah,
weather, save lives, like my whole life.
yeah.
And so I feel like I thrive on that and live on that. But I definitely had one chief in particular back with City of Leander who was an absolute amazing leader. And I really appreciate what they did for me because they really believed in me, new in my career. I didn't have a lot of fire experience. I didn't have any public safety experience, and
Right.
they wanted to bring me in with my weather background, teach me the ropes. They actually put me in a couple burns just to like let me see how the bunker gear is.
Uh-huh.
But like that kind of mentorship, I think I underestimated the value that it would be as a new person. But now, like, it really left a huge impact on me. And I think like
Yeah.
when I continue to lead, like I try to remember what they were doing for me and how like they were trying to make me feel, especially when
Hmm.
I get like new emergency managers or folks who are like fresh in the field trying to learn it.
Yeah. It makes such a difference, doesn't it? Like the work you do matters, but I mean, in a lot of ways, the person you work for really matters because they can really help push you and, teach you and then inspire you when you become a leader yourself, right? To help others along the way. Um,
Yeah. And I'll just say like besides always being there for me and like supporting me and just growing me, like when I was a very tiny EM sprout,
yeah, yeah.
like I really admire his belief on community.
Mm,
So he was really big on, fire service in the community. We
yeah,
serve customer service. We
yeah,
serve the community. We don't not answer emails or phone calls from our residents, our taxpayers, things like that. So like that kind of like made me have even more respect for it.
sure.
But also too, as someone who like I feel like I'm here to serve people. I want to protect people. Like that is so important to me. And I always kind of keep the whole saving lives and the people first
Yeah.
mentality.
Yeah, you found that purpose and it sounds like it's really, really stuck with you.
Yeah.
As someone who's passionate about, you talked about merging meteorology and emergency management. When it comes to innovations or, collaborations, what would you be excited to see, especially like in the next, as we're looking ahead, right, in the next like decade?
So I am really excited because I am 2 years deep into my PhD in emergency management right now.
Congrats.
Thank you. I'm surviving and thriving.
Yeah.
So I am about to start my dissertation, and I am going to be studying the base level of weather literacy in emergency management. So basically, just taking a look at like on a local level, what do emergency managers on average understand about weather?
Mhm.
What do they understand about forecasts and risks, and what do they not? And my goal, once I do this dissertation, is to be able to do some publications on that so that we can also assess some of the FEMA weather trainings at like EMI and through the other sites and kind of try to address that. You know, a big example is I know there is no weather radar training currently in any of the EMI classes that we teach emergency managers today.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah, yeah. If you go to an EOC during any kind of storm activation, we all always are like staring at the radar, squinting at the
Trying to
radar.
understand it. Yeah, right.
Yeah, so my goal would be like if I did the study and it shows that we don't really understand like what radar is telling us,
Hmm.
proposing some kind of radar training either as an edit with some of the EMI curriculum that we already have or making
Sure.
a whole new training. And then assessing after that.
Yeah.
If an EM takes the radar training, do they know more now? And then
Yeah.
does that lead to better decision making? So for me, like I want to see weather training improved because we often are kind of put in situations where we have to assess weather, we have to be confident in it, and we have to speak it to our elected officials and everyone else when we're in here.
Yeah.
And I think that that would be a huge help, especially with some of the stuff that NOAA and NWS are trying to work on with, weather briefings and support. They've done a great job, but we also need to kind of hold up our end of the bargain and learn a little
Yeah.
bit so that we can, again, take the information they're giving us and apply it and save the most people.
That's awesome, Ashley. You talked a little bit about, looking ahead. What's next for you in your career? You mentioned your PhD journey. But beyond that, are there big projects, goals, initiatives? What's getting you really excited about working toward in the years ahead? Because you've got a long career ahead of you.
Yeah, and I always joke, a lot of my friends would say, "Oh yeah, you said you'd never retire." So we'll see. I might just work till I'm very old. For me, I love local level emergency management, but I also am really, really passionate about what I was saying before with like some of the academic stuff.
Yeah.
Um, as I kind of have progressed, like I've taught some ICS classes, I'm starting to teach like HCEP and some of those other FEMA classes in partnership with the state. And my passion is actually really in that
Yeah.
because like I really like talking about like the tripping points that we have in EM with people in my training, like, hey, this part of the planning P, we always skip this. We shouldn't skip this, but it always gets skipped because of this reason. So I'm hoping like one day that I'll be able to teach more.
Yeah.
Either, maybe at EMI one day, I don't know, or definitely when I graduate with my PhD, I want to do adjunct and teach university classes in the evenings and stuff. But I'm also really passionate, and if you ask some of my friends about this, they'll tell you too. Just emergency management advocacy, but also like establishment of accountability and just
Hmm.
standards. I think as someone who is really data driven, but also like sees how important it is to know what we're doing during like high stakes incidents. I was really appalled or interested to see that we really didn't have any kind of like guardrails in local EM
Yeah.
telling us that we need to do anything. It varies from state to state. Some states like require you to turn in EOPs and plans. Other states, they don't really do that. So for me, like I also want to kind of see if one day I can help contribute with research to establishing standards to just help guide our practitioners better so that we can have better outcomes because we continue to see some of the same balls like with
Hmm.
alert systems and plans and other things, they continue to drop.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I'm hoping that one day we can fix that with some of that.
Well, Ashley, I'm feeling hopeful with someone like you, kind of at the helm in leading the way and in all of that. Um, it's been great connecting with you and hearing some of the work that you're doing, but also the plans for the future. I think the field is only going to be better off with, brilliant, passionate people like you leading the way. You mentioned your social media, so where can folks go to follow your journey and see what you're up to?
Sure. So I'm still on Twitter or X at
Yeah.
Miss Ashes 92. I don't post there as much because a lot of people have left and gone to LinkedIn.
Okay. So lots of posting
So
on LinkedIn.
yeah, so find me with my name under LinkedIn, but you can still find me on X. I also have a Blue Sky under the same Miss Ashes 92.
Okay.
And then I do have an Instagram, Ashley Morris CEM. It's new and I'm very busy, so don't judge the lack of
So
content.
stand by.
Uh,
Yeah.
there's only probably like 5 posts, and like I haven't done a lot of reels or anything, but I've told some of my other friends like I really kind of like when I have some time want to experiment with how we can do more preparedness on reels and stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that, Ashley. I can't wait to see what you'll do next. We'll be following along for sure. Thanks again for being with us today, and hopefully we'll get to do this again sometime.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Ashley. And that's a wrap on this episode of Careers and Coffee Talk. Big thanks to our guest today for pouring out so many great insights. And hey, thanks to you for hanging out with us. If this episode gave you a little jolt of inspiration or made your day a little bit more brewed and balanced, be sure to click that subscribe button so you don't miss what's coming up next. Got a minute? Drop me a 5-star review. It's basically the podcast equivalent of buying me a fancy oat milk latte. Quick disclaimer though, the views expressed in this episode are personal and do not reflect those of any organization. This conversation is not an endorsement of any company, product, or service. It's just real talk over virtual coffee, okay? So until next time, stay curious, stay caffeinated, and keep chasing the career that makes you feel the most alive. Catch you next time.